to you by the College of Graduate Studies and the Career Center. And you can see this workshop is being recorded. My name is Carrie McKnight. I am a career counselor at the SJSU Career Center, and I'm the liaison from the Career Center to the College of Graduate Studies. So what that means is I'm the main career counselor for graduate students, and I also partner with the College of Graduate Studies to put on workshops and programming like today's session. I'm joined by Winnie, who's a student peer from the Career Center, and Winnie's going to be helping out with managing chat. And she's also going to be posting 2 or 3 times a check-in form. We know you've all registered for this workshop. We also like to track your attendance, so please fill out that check-in form. That also will be the contact information that I will use to send you the recording and the slides after today's session. So we'll go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be talking about core competencies and skills that employers seek and look for in students and recent graduates. I'm also going to be asking you throughout to share a little bit. So share in chat some examples of how you're demonstrating or developing core competencies and skills. And then we'll talk a little bit about some resources, Career Center resources towards the end. So here's a little bit of the agenda. So we're first going to talk a little bit about what employers are looking for and how they're kind of shifting their focus and how they screen candidates for resumes and so forth. And then we're going to talk about career readiness core competencies, what employers are looking for, what are those competencies. We're going to be discussing top 8 competencies or transferable skills that employers are seeking. And then we're going to talk about how to demonstrate core competencies on your resume, or maybe through interviewing, networking, other ways that you can demonstrate and showcase your core competencies. And as I mentioned, I'm hoping to hear from all of you as we go through, share a little bit of how you are building or demonstrating your core competencies or transferable skills on your resume and beyond. The information we are using today comes from NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers. NACE is a professional association that brings together college career centers and employers and together an association, and they do conferences and do research and surveys and studies around, what recruiters are looking for to help those of us who work in university career services understand what employers are seeking. So the core competencies and their definitions come from NACE. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. And again, this comes from information that surveys that NACE does in terms of learning more about what employers or recruiters are seeking in college students and recent graduates, undergraduates and graduate students. So according to some surveys that NACE has done to understand what employers are seeking, they've found out over the last few years that employers are really looking more at screening candidates on competencies and skills rather than looking at things like GPA. So lots of shifts have happened in the last few years. And they have come to the understanding that screening for GPA can weaken your ability to find inclusive candidates and inclusive workforce, considering students, or especially graduate students, are balancing school and family life and other responsibilities. So more and more employers are increasingly more concerned about demonstratable skills and competencies. So in other words, you need to, on your resume, your LinkedIn profile, beyond, really showcase and highlight your skills, strengths, and core competencies that employers are seeking. There are different types of skills. So there are what we like to call transferable skills or core competencies. That's what we're going to be focusing on today. There's also what are known as knowledge-based or technical skills. Those would be what you'd be developing out of your graduate program, your coursework, or technical training. And there's also another category of skills, which are more like strengths, like personal attributes or personal strengths. So there's kind of like 3 categories. There's the transferable core competencies, there's the knowledge-based technical skills, and personal attributes or strengths. So our discussion today is focused on core competencies, or also known as transferable skills. People used to use the term soft skills, but that's kind of gone out. It's really more, the term now is competencies or core competencies. Okay, so what are these career readiness core competencies that employers are seeking? Those are the top 8 that we're talking about today. There are more. This has been based on surveys from NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers. This is based on their surveys. So the last survey indicated these are the top 8 core competencies that employers are seeking to find on a resume, seeking in candidates when they're applying or hiring for jobs or internships. So what we want to talk about today are what are the definitions of these core competencies. You might have heard these terms before, but what are the definitions based on the research from NACE? And then how might you showcase or highlight these core competencies on a resume or maybe a profile, cover letters, and beyond. So we're kind of focusing on resume, but I also want to open the discussion to what are other ways all of you are first developing these core competencies while you're a graduate student, and then where are you showcasing or highlighting them on a resume or profiles, or maybe in your professional pitch or in your interview. So where and how are you developing these and showcasing these core competencies? So we're going to be talking a little bit about critical thinking, teamwork or collaborative work, professionalism or work ethic, communication skills, digital skills, technology skills, leadership, career and self-development, which is something kind of new that has come up more recently in the NACE research, and then equity and inclusion. So those are the top 8 currently that employers are seeking. So we're going to go through each of these competencies, again, talk about what the definitions of them are. I have some examples of how you might describe them on a resume, but I also want to hear from all of you how you might be highlighting these skills in a resume or elsewhere, or how you might be building them. So take a look at these right now and maybe think for a moment, are you highlighting or showcasing these on your resume, or what are you doing currently to develop these competencies through activities, through courses, through internships, volunteering, other things that you might be involved in at SJSU and beyond while you are a graduate student? Okay, so before we get into talking about individual competencies and how we might showcase them on a resume, how might you develop them? So again, be thinking about this as well. And I'd like to hear from all of you what you're doing to actively develop these competency areas. So it could be on campus jobs. So this is in addition to maybe your work experience or coursework or things you're doing with projects. This is sort of beyond that. So working on the campus, doing service learning, which could be a course where you do a community service project or a service project as part of a course. Maybe doing research with faculty or research in your courses. Volunteering in the community is another way you might develop core competencies. Being active as a student, maybe in student clubs or organizations, maybe leadership activities or student involvement activities on the campus. Internships, of course, are good ways to develop core competencies, and then contests and competitions. For example, the Grad Slam, which will be happening in the spring semester, is an example of a competition. So they're just ideas to help you think about outside of maybe your traditional work or jobs or courses. What else might you do at the university and beyond to help you develop skills and competencies? And again, I want to hear from all of you what you might be doing. Some of these, or maybe there's some other activities you can share with others today so we can get ideas of how to develop these transferable skills or competencies while we are a student. Okay, as I mentioned, we're going to go through each competency, discuss the definitions based on what the NACE research and what employers are seeking. I have some examples of how you might describe these on a resume, but I want to hear from all of you what you might have on a current resume or what you're doing in terms of showcasing and highlighting or building these competency areas. So NACE defines this as critical thinking is the first one. So this is at the top of the list of sought after core competencies. So they define it as identify and respond to needs based on understanding of situational context and logical analysis of relevant information. So some sample behaviors for this would be making decisions and using sound, inclusive reasoning and using judgment, gathering and analyzing information, using a diverse set of sources or individuals, proactively anticipating needs, prioritizing action steps, summarizing and interpreting data, effectively communicating actions and rationale for decisions, and using sound decision making. So that's their definition of critical thinking. And then through your courses as graduate students, you should be developing critical thinking, of course, but also what other activities are you involved in that is helping you develop problem solving and critical thinking skills. Here's some examples of how you might describe this. So this could be different, maybe on a resume or an online profile, for example. So here is maybe in your summary in a resume or in your work experience or project experience. So created and presented intervention plan focused on strength-based learning methods to improve academic performance at an elementary school. So going to think about critical thinking, problem-solving ability, evaluated customer complaints and negative reviews for class projects. So again, you could describe your critical thinking through class projects and courses. Identify 3 key service issues to improve customer satisfaction. So again, we're looking at the ability to gather data, summarize data, make sound decisions using judgment, problem-solving ability. So how would you demonstrate critical thinking on your resume? So does anybody have an example of how you are describing critical thinking or showcasing critical thinking on a resume? So if you have, we're a small group today, so feel free to unmute if you'd like, or put something in chat. Anybody have an example of how they're showcasing, highlighting critical thinking, or how you're developing that, maybe actively developing or getting more experience in using critical thinking or problem solving? Anybody? Maybe we'll warm up as we go through, or feel free to unmute if you have an example. And this one's a little bit maybe challenging. We're going to talk about some others like teamwork and leadership and communication, and maybe that will be a little bit easier to come up with some examples. But again, this is the definition. I'll be sending you the recording and the slides so you can look back at how NACE describes, defines these core competencies, and you'll have these examples of how you might think about describing from your own experience. Okay, well, feel free to jump in if something comes to mind, or put something in chat.
Hi, Carrie.
Yeah.
I think one example I have is relating to analyzing data. So my major right now is artificial intelligence. So one way I try to show that in my resume, as a core competency is finding what I'm getting from that data. So if I'm identifying a certain issue and
Mm-hmm.
how I go through the STAR method, of like how I
Oh,
identified
yeah.
the issue,
Uh-huh.
resolved it, and then what are the outcomes. I think that's kind of one way I try to show my critical thinking.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, using the STAR method's a great way. So the situation, task, action, result, or outcome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's a really great example of how to, think through critical thinking is a little bit, like I said, sort of problem solving, making decisions, but it's maybe a little bit challenging to describe on a resume. So using STAR is really, really great tip. So thank you for that, Jose. I appreciate that. Some of these might get a little easier again to think about in your own experience. So next is teamwork. So build and maintain collaborative relationships effectively towards meeting common goals, appreciating diverse viewpoints. So this is listening carefully, taking time to understanding, asking appropriate questions, effectively managing conflict, being accountable for individual and team responsibilities, employing personal strengths and complementing those others. So understanding what your own strengths in a team and then complementing, looking to others to understand their strengths. So we're all coming together, working on common goals using our strengths, being flexible, and then collaborating to achieve common goals. So I'm sure you all have experience at teamwork as a graduate student or jobs, internships. So maybe you have some examples you could share how you're demonstrating teamwork or collaboration on your resume or beyond. So here's some examples of collaborate with team for a class project, developing curriculum, partner with 15 classmates and faculty to organize a Green Careers Week event. So what are your ideas about teamwork collaboration? How are all of you demonstrating or showcasing that? And any examples would be great. Or what are you actively doing to develop your collaborative competency area? Anybody have an example of teamwork collaboration, maybe through a project or other activity? So this is obviously important to employers. It's like, just making sure you are touching on this somewhere. Most jobs, careers, or some aspect of it where you're working, even in most of your job is independent work, there's always going to be some element of team or collaboration in your work. So just making sure you're touching on this somewhere in your resume. So in your summary, describing projects, internships, volunteer experiences, for example, is a good way to showcase teamwork or collaborative work. Also, sometimes students will ask me, you're talking about 8 competencies. How am I going to fit this? Am I trying to have a one-page resume? You don't necessarily have to touch on all of these, but it's important to at least be familiar with what they are. And then when you can, try to incorporate them in different portions of your resume or LinkedIn profile, cover letters, interviewing, being aware of what employers are seeking, and try to develop them and then showcase them throughout your resume and other portions of your profiles, etc. Okay, no examples of teamwork. Okay, so we have something. Okay, so Evan's saying, I put down my resume at my last position. I mentored and guided several team members through technical work issues. So thank you. Perfect. Mentoring is a great example of obviously collaborating with others, doing team projects with others. Thank you for that, Evan. Okay, so professionalism and work ethic. This is, again, this and the career development competency are sort of a little bit relatively new. And we hear a lot from the employers that we work with really wanting to understand more about students' ability to demonstrate work ethic and professionalism. So this is defined by NACE as knowing work environments are different, understand and demonstrate effective work habits, act in interests of a larger community and workplace. So there's some things like demonstrating integrity and being accountable, being prepared and present when you show up for work, being dependable, reliable, understanding how to prioritize tasks and accomplish goals, meeting or exceeding goals and expectations, having an attention to detail, and showing a high level of dedication towards your job. So it's really just that being responsible, reliable, dependable, showing up, being ready, being prepared. And again, this has kind of come up higher on the list of core competencies in recent years as more and more employers are expressing that this is an area that they are not finding candidates that are demonstrating that. So this could be a little bit more challenging to demonstrate on a resume. Here's a couple examples. And again, feel free to jump in with any ideas or thoughts from all of you about how could you demonstrate this, showcase this, and also build this up while you're a student. So demonstrated meticulous attention to detail by thoroughly reviewing documents, and then exceeded subscription sales goals, part-time role, digital marketing agency. So something where you feel like you went above and beyond, exceeded goals or exceeded expectations. That would be a way to demonstrate professionalism or work ethic. And then showcasing what they were mentioning and sort of the definition, like attention to detail, being dependable, reliable, describing that in a resume or cover letter, or maybe even in an interview when asked. Sometimes there's a question asked of like, what would your coworkers or supervisors describe you? How would they describe you? So that would be a great place to talk about how you've demonstrated high work ethic and professionalism. And then just be kind of aware of this when you're interning, volunteering activities you may be involved in, is showing up, be prepared, be dependable, be reliable. A lot of this is kind of a reputation competency that others can describe you. Also part of your personal brand, what you're known for, what's kind of your reputation, your legacy. So thinking about your work ethic and your level of professionalism while you are, again, working, interning, being involved in projects. Anybody have an example of something that they're doing that's showcasing ethic or work ethic? Or feel free to jump in. Would I say I helped improve efficiency by X% through improvements? Yes, yeah, definitely. Kind of back to using the STAR method again. That would be a good way to showcase work ethic and going above and beyond, exceeding goals, reaching goals, exceeding goals. So yeah, using the STAR method. Also in interviews, describing the way you've been dependable, reliable, how you've, again, exceeded goals, reached goals. STAR method also is helpful for answering behavioral questions in an interview. So that's a good place where you can also showcase professionalism as well. Okay, communication. Well, maybe we'll get some more examples here. I'm sure you all have examples of clearly and effectively exchanging information, ideas, facts. This includes inside and outside of an organization where you may be working or interning. And this also includes written, verbal, written, and non-verbal body language communication. So it's sort of a combination. And this is a little bit combines verbal, written, and non-verbal body language for communication. So some sample behaviors they describe as employing active listening, persuasion and influencing skills, communicating in clear, organized manner so that others can understand you, framing communication with respect to diversity of learning styles and cultural differences. So being able to change your message based on your audience or how you deliver your message or information based on your audience, asking appropriate questions, and then informing others and needing guidance on tasks. So it's verbal, written communication. Written communication is another core competency area that employers are really often expressing and having difficulty finding students or recent graduates with high level writing skills. So if you've got strong writing skills, definitely highlight that on your resume, on your cover letters, et cetera, because that's something really highly in demand. And of course, verbal communication, being able to communicate with coworkers, supervisors, also being able to present information, maybe at a meeting, so forth. So think about how you can get experience while you're a graduate student and presenting at conferences and your class presentations, communicating with team members, classmates and projects, developing high level of effective, clear communication skills, verbal and written communication skills, and also how you present yourself, sort of go back to the professionalism, your professional images and body language as well. So here's a couple examples of maybe for a resume. So trained new virtual employees on Zoom, via Zoom, effectively teaching procedures and processes. Another way to demonstrate communication skills is maybe being involved as a student leader on campus. So served as a liaison to campus community as a president of the Creative Arts Club, presented to various groups on campus. So, getting involved in student leadership, organizations, even outside the university, like professional associations, where there might be opportunity for you to attend conferences, present papers at conferences, present your research. So all opportunities to develop and demonstrate communication, verbal and written communication. How do you demonstrate effective communication on your resume or in interviews? So does anybody have an example of how you talk about your communication skills or abilities, or how you describe that? Maybe through like class, course presentations or projects. I see a hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Jose.
one way I show through my resume is just showing how I take lead in presentations or in group environments where I have to communicate something effectively, but also showing that I can communicate something technical. So I'll bring up that I had to explain something technical to a non-technical person. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that shows a lot of patience as well. So that's one way I showed in my resume.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really important, being able to explain something technical to a non-technical person or audience. That's really important to learn. That's a really important skill to learn. That's clear, effective communication and understanding who your audience is. Thank you for that, Jose. Let's see. Making sure to add committees, groups I'm involved in, and show the consistent. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Committees you're serving on, highlight that. Student organizations I mentioned, highlight that on your resume. Different ways that you demonstrate communication, effective communication. Thank you for that. And then anybody have an example of interviews? Do you talk about communication and interviews? And so that's again back to the behavioral questions, giving some examples of how you've communicated with team members or group members or presentations, as has been mentioned already. This is really important. So as I mentioned, you might not be able to fit all 8 core competencies on your resume, touch on all 8 of them, but some I think are super important. And for sure, I think written communication and different types of communicating with team members, group members, supervisors, et cetera, is really important. So think about how you might make sure you have a bullet point here and there in your work experience or in your summary, or other activities you're being involved in, so you can showcase or highlight effective communication. Thank you for those that shared examples. Okay, digital technology or literacy. This is probably a little bit more straightforward in terms of how to include on a resume. So understand, leverage technologies ethically to enhance efficiencies and accomplish goals. So some sample behaviors for demonstrating this is navigating change, being open to learning new technologies, using technology to improve efficiency, productivity, Identifying appropriate technology for certain types of tasks or projects, manipulate information, construct ideas, use technology to achieve strategic goals, and quickly adapt to new unfamiliar technology. That's something we hear a lot from employers, that just having the ability to learn new technologies, sorry, to adapt quickly. Of course, AI right now, highlighting your resume, AI tools that you use, is really important. How to understand what technologies are appropriate and ethical approaches to using technology, and making that shift or change as needed and learning new things, I think is really important. We hear a lot of that from employers. So mentioning that somewhere in your resume or cover letters, how you're able to learn new technologies, adapt quickly, shift and as needed to learn new things. So again, this might be a little bit more kind of easier to showcase, more straightforward. So participated in cybersecurity workshops. So maybe you're doing certifications or trainings on certain types of technology or technical skills. And then integrated virtual museum experiences into art history coursework. So understand the intersection between technology and art. So there's different ways to bring this in. If you're depending on your program or major, you can bring in use of technology and have some examples there. So you want to do a couple different things in terms of tech skills or technology on a resume. So it's good to just have a list of your areas you feel proficient in, of relevant technical skills, and then also within your descriptions of your work experience or projects, describe how you demonstrated or use that technical skill. So it's good to really do both on a resume, one for ATS and also for human eye, so they can quickly see the skills, and then also see how you've described or used those skills in projects, internships, jobs, etc. I like to list the tools I have experience with on my resume. Yeah, so that's great. So thank you. Using Coursera certifications or just online classes for new skills. Yes, definitely. So you could have like a certification section back to, different ways to showcase on a resume. So throughout, you can have like professional development or training or certifications on your resume. You can also have a list of skills and where you've received those certifications. That's important. And then, of course, remember, maybe it's not all going to fit on your resume. You can also include some of this information on LinkedIn profile as well. Okay, leadership. So this is another really important area for employers, and we hear this a lot too. So, and it doesn't mean necessarily leadership in the sense of being a supervisor or manager. It's really they describe it as recognize and capitalize on personal and team strengths to achieve organizational goals. So some behaviors are being able to inspire, persuade, motivate others. So you don't have to be a supervisor to motivate others, to just motivate team members or group members, seeking diverse resources and feedback, serving as a role model. So someone who is a role model to others, colleagues or peers is important. Building trust, plan, initiate, manage, and complete projects, and having innovative thinking. So I think that's a lot of leadership is having a vision, innovative thinking, and be able to motivate others and build a team, showcase like the ability to understand your own strengths and work with others and understanding their strengths as well. So, and what are you all doing now? So how do you demonstrate leadership on your resume or elsewhere? And then what are you doing now? Does anybody have an example of maybe you are student leader or involved in leadership activities or professional associations and you're serving on a committee? Anybody have an example of how you are demonstrating or building leadership skills while you're a graduate student? So here's some examples: spearheaded planning for global studies commencement ceremony as part of a student leadership team, initiated and developed concept for SGSU's evening art walk for creative arts students, showcase their senior projects. So some examples of activities here on the campus, maybe through some student leadership opportunities or organizations. Do they have an example of your leadership activities or how you might be showcasing leadership? And it could be volunteering. It could be something you're doing in a project. Maybe you're leading a project. Anybody have a leadership example? And if you're thinking about it and you're not sure, take advantage of what's available while you're a student. So again, student organizations are good opportunities. volunteering on the university or outside the university, joining professional associations or groups. Often they're looking for graduate students to serve on committees or help manage events or organize events through professional associations. So take a look at those opportunities that are available for you as a graduate student, and then step up, when you can, volunteer when you can, or run for office, so you can get that leadership experience. Okay, feel free to just jump in or give her a small group. If you just want to unmute, give an example, or share in chat how you are building leadership or demonstrating leadership. Again, highly important to employers.
This isn't something I'm currently doing right now, but during my undergraduate studies, I was a leader in a volunteer organization.
Okay.
So that's one way I was building it. I guess right now I'm having a hard time building it currently because I take classes online, so I'm away from campus, so it's hard for me
Okay.
to find those leadership uh, opportunities.
Yeah, so you're not coming to the campus. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
you could consider looking at outside organizations, as I mentioned,
Hmm.
like professional associations that are connected to your career field or industry. That often you can, again, they have like reduced or waived fees for graduate students for many of them. And also a good opportunity for professional development, like as I was saying, attending conferences or seminars that might be hosted by professional associations. You might look
Hmm.
into something like that. You could check with your faculty. Your faculty advisors often will, or program coordinators for your graduate programs will often know what organizations or associations would be good for graduate students to join or get involved in. We also have some resources at the Career Center if you want to
Hmm.
reach out to me for that as well. I see
Yeah, I appreciate
something.
it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Would leadership from undergrad be helpful? As I was a student government, yeah, I guess depending what it was, if it's fairly recent in the last few years, sure. I think you could
Mhm.
include that on a resume or again LinkedIn profile or elsewhere. Yeah, anytime you were a leader in the last few years as a student or outside of the university, definitely include that because again, this is a sought after core competencies and employers mention. Just about every time there's any kind of survey, leadership always falls somewhere at the top of it, sought after
Yeah.
competency.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Evan, for sharing that. Okay, we will keep going. Okay, so I mentioned earlier, this is kind of relatively new on the list of core competencies. So it's career and self-development. So they define it as proactively develop yourself through continual personal and professional learning, navigate career opportunities, be aware of your strengths and weaknesses, build network to build relationships. So if you've joined us to any other workshop like our last one, we talked a lot about networking and how important that is for graduate students to build and maintain a professional network. And some of the sample behaviors are developing plans and goals for your future, identifying areas of growth and so ongoing learning, um, seek out opportunities to learn, develop new skills, assume duties, positions to help you progress professionally, advance in your career, establish and maintain relationships. So that networking, building relationships within your career field and industry, participate in education and training, and then seeking out the development opportunities. So it's kind of around self-awareness. So what employers are saying here is they want candidates who understand, what are the in-demand skills, what's necessary to be prepared within the career field and industry, and taking that upon themselves. So not waiting for your supervisor to say, oh, I need you to take this course, but you on your own also attend conferences and seminars and certifications. We've already mentioned certifications earlier. Seeking out those opportunities for career and professional self-development and then networking, joining the professional associations that I've already mentioned, getting active in your professional community, and a good time to get started with that as well. You're a graduate student, and then just making that part of your practice, that you're always seeking out opportunities to learn, develop new skills and competency areas, and taking that responsibility for yourself. So that could be a little bit different in terms of how would you demonstrate that, but I think through some of the things we've already discussed would be a way to demonstrate career development. So pursue additional certifications and training outside of your regular courses, seeking out those opportunities. If it's LinkedIn learning courses, which you have free access to as a student, or other online courses or seminars, This one's interesting. Regularly read industry publications, blogs, and articles to stay informed about current trends. So that might be something if you're actively reading journals and articles related to your career field or industry. Showcase that. Mention that in your About section in LinkedIn profile, or maybe that's part of when you introduce yourself at a networking event or even in an interview. So you can mention that I'm up to date on trends within the industry. I'm continually reading publications. I subscribe to these publications or journals, or I'm attending these workshops or seminars to stay up to date with my career and my career growth. Anybody have an example of how you would describe career development on your resume? So it could be, as I already mentioned, certifications, training. You can have a professional development section on a resume where you would list maybe conferences that you're attending or seminars that you're attending, or being a member of some of these professional groups or associations that we've talked about already. But anybody have an example about how you're showcasing your career development? Kendra.
I actually joined a boot camp so I could better learn the tools for my area of expertise. So that's one way I would showcase it, just letting them know that I joined a boot camp to better learn the tools of the trade.
Thank you. Perfect. Perfect example. Thank you so much. Yeah. Boot camps, as I mentioned earlier, like, competitions, things like that, or another way to showcase that. Skill development, career development, attending, getting active in associations and groups, attending events. Some of that could be on a resume. Again, some of it may be more when you're in conversation with recruiters or hiring managers, just to let them know that you're aware of your own career development and what you're doing to stay on top of trends. Okay, thank you, Winnie. Yeah, please fill out that form. Okay, all right. So we're coming towards the end of our competencies here. So equity and inclusion. So demonstrate the awareness and attitude, knowledge, skills required to equitably engage and include people from different local and global cultures. So some things in terms of how you could demonstrate this, or sample behaviors, would be solicit and use feedback from multiple cultural perspectives, actively contribute to inclusive, equitable practices, keep an open mind to diverse ideas, identify resources, eliminate barriers, seek global cross-cultural interactions and experience. So this is something really you could do at the university. So getting involved in committees, attending different types of events, cultural events on campus, through various activities, either at your work or internship, if they're offering kind of specialized training or workshops or materials and related to equity and inclusion, take advantage of those. Also what's happening at the university. And so some examples here where a student founded an international student mentoring program to bring together domestic international students, to foster awareness and understanding, participating in diversity council meetings. So maybe joining a committee or a council that focuses on diversity or inclusion. So that might be some things to check out, maybe at your workplace or at the university, just so you can have some examples of how you are demonstrating this competency and understanding this competency area. I think in terms of on the resume, it might be more like training or getting involved in committees or councils, et cetera. Might be something you can include on a resume, or be prepared to talk about in an interview what kind of activities you've been involved in, or what is your understanding or knowledge of equity, inclusion, and diversity. Did anybody have an example about that? Is something you're involved in, activity or student organization or something at the university? Any examples of that? And again, a lot of this is just to share with you what employers are looking for, and then just give you some ideas to think through. Okay, what do I need to build up on? What are some experiences I need to develop so I can have more exposure to these core competency areas, or improve my core competencies, and how I'm going to describe them on a resume or interview, for example. Okay, just have a couple minutes here. So how else might you demonstrate these core competencies? So we've talked a lot about resume cover letter. I gave you some examples of what some maybe bullet points might look like for a resume. LinkedIn is another great place. So of course you can select skills in your skills section. The About section on your LinkedIn profile is a great way to bring in some examples of your core competencies. Of course, describing your experience or projects in your LinkedIn profile or other profiles is a good way to demonstrate or showcase the competencies. Networking, introducing yourself, sharing a little bit about yourself, maybe your professional pitch at a job fair or meeting with recruiters. You could touch on some competency areas in your pitch or when you're introducing yourself. Interviewing, so tell me about yourself. Interview question, you might sprinkle a little bit of a couple core competencies there, or just responding to behavioral questions and other types of interview questions. You can bring in how you've developed your core competencies. And then your overall professional image, your professional brand, showcasing them there. And then any other kind of websites, blogs, social media that you might be using where you want to demonstrate core competencies. So lots of different ways to showcase these and build these. And so today was just really hoping you can understand a little bit more what employers are seeking, and then ways to develop and showcase these core competencies on your resume and beyond. Winnie's going to put in chat these some resources for you. So we have a skills inventory, which is a worksheet to help you kind of gauge where you are with core competencies. You can, it's a self-assessment, so you can rate where you are in core competencies and identify what competencies or skills you want to develop. So that worksheet is available to you. And then Winnie's going to share a page to where we have all of our career guides. We have several different career guides on our website. And so there's a resume cover letter guide with the whole section of how to write accomplishment statements based on core competency areas, plus resume samples, cover letter examples. We have a LinkedIn guide that has a section on how to improve or develop a LinkedIn profile with examples of how to write the about section, also tips on how to connect with alumni and others on LinkedIn, and an interviewing guide, again, with a worksheet in there that you can put together answers to questions like behavioral questions, situational questions, where you might touch on some of your core competencies. Any other questions or sharing about what we're doing to develop skills and competencies while we're a student? Other examples of how we're showcasing or highlighting?
Someone had a question earlier in the chat.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, they asked, would doing course certificates or just online classes for new skills be useful to put down on their resume?
Yes, yeah. So you can have a like certification section or professional development and training, and then you can list the online certifications or other courses outside of your graduate program that you're taking. So yeah, definitely that could be on your resume.
There's also another question from earlier, from Evan, where he asked, he put down his resume from his last position, and he mentored and guided several team members. And he is asking, would saying I helped improve efficiency by X% through improvements work for this point?
Yes, I think we talked about that. That was good for the exceeding, going above and beyond, like the professionalism and work ethic. Yeah, so definitely that, the accomplishment statements would be a good way to demonstrate the professionalism and kind of going above and beyond, exceeding goals, so reaching goals. Yeah. Thank you, Winnie. Okay, so should we have some resources in chat, and then information here about the Career Center is moving this week to Clark Hall, and there's contact information, career help at sjsu.edu for general questions. You can also reach out to me directly or schedule an appointment if you want to talk more about skills and competencies or your resume, etc. And there's information there at the bottom about the Career Center website if you want to visit that. And I think there was something else. Was there another? Okay. These questions are okay. Okay, great. Thank you very much for joining us today. It was just a 45-minute workshop. So thank you for joining us, and feel free to reach out with any questions. You can reach me directly at carrie.mcknight@sjsu.edu, or there's the general Career Center box there. And we hope you have a good rest of your semester and Thanksgiving break next week. And I will send to all of you the recording and the slides.